The Class 92 has lacked a worthy 00 gauge rendition for as long as I've been modelling, and the arrival of Accurascale's Class 92 is thankfully set to change that going forward. With lots of positive reviews already in the bag, is there anything new to uncover about this highly specified model? I believe there is, and what I thought was going to be a straightforward review a few days before posting this video has become a little bit more complicated to the point where a follow-up video is going to be required to close. I'll get into the reasons and rationale for that later in this video. Hi, thanks for joining today. The bulk of this video will follow my normal format with an unboxing, close-up views, followed by a short running session. As we get into the summary and scoring sections, there will be a couple of gaps and I'll cover these when we get there. I won't be in a position to provide a final scoring and recommendation in this particular video, but there's still a lot to cover for today, so let's get into it. Okay, so let's look at the unboxing of this model, which arrived on my doorstep this morning. So we're looking at the Class 92, 92003, also known as Beethoven, with DCC Sound Fitted. So this is my first 92 from Accurascale, so you'll be seeing the experience as I go through it, because I haven't even opened this box yet. So let's just see. So I guess the box is similar to what you'll be used to from the Class 55, if you got one of those, or if you watch the review of those. So it's a substantial box, and let's see what we got in here. Oh, window blinds, my goodness. Okay, interesting. Okay, need to look at that afterwards. The pantographs are locked in position, so I'll have to remember to unlock those. Okay, that's good to have a warning note on that, so let's keep that one to hand. We've got our, an interesting kind of reference card for the function list. I actually do like this. I think it's a good idea to have this to kind of help. Sometimes I just print out a card like this myself. So that's nice to have. We've got the operator guide. Okay, interesting. So it gives a bit of history on the model, etc. So that's kind of, again, I suppose we got this with the Class 55 as well. So nice to see that. And what's this one? Operating and caring for your model. So it's kind of the typical maintenance sheet, I guess. And talks about unpacking, wheel cleaning, etc. And then if you want to remove the body. So I didn't really intend to remove the body in the near term, but the only reason I might want to do it in the long run, apart from maintenance, would be to add a driver. But that's probably going to be down the road. I won't be looking at that immediately. Okay, there they're showing. And there are drivers for this. I did notice that on the site you can pre-order a driver. So again, this is very familiar territory in terms of the Class 55, and very familiar, kind of familiar territory if you're used to unpacking a DAPL locomotive, which tends to come in a very similar box. So we'll put that to one side. I guess the only difference with DAPL, they do put an extra block of kind of expanded polystyrene either end to provide additional protection. Now this looks pretty solid as it is, so I think this packaging is pretty good. So let's just get rid of that guy as well. Okay, so it's a reasonable weight, as I would kind of expect it to be, and so we'll take that off. Now I do see a little piece of detail on the bottom there. That's kind of, I wonder, does that come loose or is that from the detailing kit? We'll discover that, I suppose, in due course. And let's take this guy out. So it is weighty. So there is the little detailing kit. And there's kind of these little etched plates that you can put up the BR logo in there. It's kind of metal etched piece that you can apply. And okay, there's kind of an air dam there. I might like to fit one of those. And a little bit of pipe work. Okay, so it's not excessive. It's a lot of detail on the model, I guess. So let's get him out of this. Okay, so it does look really nice, I guess, on first viewing. And I think the roof looks really good, and obviously the pantographs are reasonably substantial. So we'll take a look at removing the catch that's holding those in place before we power up the model. So I'm just going to take this guy out, and he does look really nice. I do like this livery, and I do like the kind of added detail for the channel tunnel that's kind of showing in there. It's kind of, I suppose, emblematic of the tunnel. And this does look like quite a nice model for sure. Nice levels of detail. The bogies look really good. We'll do the normal close-ups on this, but it does look, it feels like a substantial model, feels like a quality model, looks like a quality model. I'm just looking into the cab area there, and that looks really nice levels of detail in the cab. And again, we'll look to get close-ups of that. I do have kind of a preference of, I guess, pre-fitted drivers. That's just my preference, and it just saves the hassle of trying to remove this body to add them. So, which is just a pity, but because not everybody thinks the same, so that's fine. All right, so this looks really good out of the box. This looks like a really, really top model. I'm really looking forward to getting this onto the track. I'm just looking at the kind of bogies there, and what are we looking at? Okay, that coupler looks like it's coming down a little bit there. Ah, yeah, there he is. He was coming down a bit. I might look at adding one of those little kind of air dam pieces to the front. We'll get this run in first, and then we'll load it up, and we'll do a full running session with it. But I think next we want to take some photographs as well, take some photo close-ups, and we'll take a look at those. Okay, so far so good. This looks like a really top model. It lives up to my expectations from the get-go. I have ordered this in the GBRF livery as well. That's actually ordered from Hatton's because it was sold out on the Accurascale website. I do see them, a few of them have reappeared. So I hope to receive that soon as well. But for now, I'll continue the review with this model, and we'll get the close-up snaps, and then we'll get it on the track. Okay, looks really good. Great start. Okay, so now we're going to get into the close-up view. So we'll start on this side. So you can see the very nice underbody there. We've got one of the pantographs extended. One point to note, you can just see the PCB there in the window of the door. So that's a PCB. You see that, the white line, and we'll see that on the other door as well. A lot of nice detail on the body, very nice livery. All the liveries on these models are fantastic. A lot of nice detail on the roof there as well. We'll see that in the 360 view. And again, some nice bogie detail and kind of cabling going on there. Now again, do you see the vents there? Do you see those lines in the vents, which are actually the PCBs that sit behind them? And there we got a PCB in the doorway as well. So unfortunately, those are taking away from this view a bit more than I thought they might do. I hadn't noticed these originally until we did this shot. You can see them again in this 360 view. So I've got both pantographs extended. There's a story behind that. I just had some issues to start out with where one was remaining extended at all times. Now that did eventually resolve itself, and you can now control it properly with either end being extendable. But this was just initially, before I had resolved that, I went back and forth with the Accurascale support, but it actually kind of resolved itself. These are still very, very nice models, and the level of detail on that roof is absolutely fantastic for a model like this. Any of the electric type models, this is a very nice rendering on the roof. Is probably as good as anything you'll get. However, I think there is another issue to talk about. We won't quite see it on this view because, let's say, the two pantographs are extended. There's probably the blades, the wipers on those pantographs, which is the very top end that contacts the catenary. That does look a little bit large or out of scale. Now, we'll see a picture in a minute of the actual prototype, and we can kind of compare the two. So here we've got a prototype, a really magnificent looking version in the DB Schenkner livery. My goodness, it's outstanding looking in this particular photograph. But you look at the front pantograph there, and again you look at the blade that's touching the catenary, and you can see it does look to be smaller or narrower than what we saw on the model. If you look at the rear pantograph there, which is actually not extended, and you can see that it's actually flush with the outline of the roof. It sits down quite low. You can't really see it. If you were looking head on at the roof, you wouldn't actually see it. And that is a huge difference to what we're seeing on the model here, where it's extended up, it's at an angle, and it's effectively kind of protruding up there. So it's very different from the prototype, the very neat look that you have on the prototype, which we'll look at one more time here. So that is quite a difference in appearance. I guess when I look at the overall appearance of the model, these two things, the pantographs and the PCBs protruding at the door and at the venting, are probably the two major items on the model that kind of let it down a little bit. And that's a real pity, because the interior detail is absolutely fantastic. The livery rendition is fantastic. Underbody and overall the roof detail is excellent as well. So these are just the two areas that do let it down, which is a great shame. It's a pity they were missed somewhere along the way. This is not the only model in town that's had a problem with PCBs showing in windows, and a lot of the new models have had that issue. They need to look at ways of addressing that. So these are my two main issues with regard to appearance, unfortunately. And if you didn't notice them up to now, apologies, because you're forever going to notice them from now on. But they are there, and they are real, unfortunately. So now we're going to get into the running session. So there is a full running session that I posted online, which I'll put the link in the description. I kind of jokingly would make the comment that I've had to do more retakes on this running session than the upcoming Indiana Jones 5 film, which apparently has had a lot of retakes. Now, most of them were due to camera issues that I had myself, so I'll take the blame for most of those. But I did have to do a reshoot because of the sound distortion problem. There certainly is an issue with sound distortion on this. If you run it at the default volume level, which is actually the maximum level for the lock sound decoder, it does distort, particularly when there's multiple sounds playing. You will hear it if you play a horn while you're accelerating the locomotive. You'll tend to hear distortion on the horn. I did a global adjustment to the volume on CV63 to 120, and that actually it seems to work fine for me, and I'm quite happy with the volume at that setting. So it's just a default issue. It's an easy thing to change. It's a pity, I guess, but at the end of the day, it's not a major showstopper. In terms of running performance, this model is extremely smooth. I had no problems in running it in. It felt like it didn't need to be run in, but I did put it through the process nevertheless. I didn't take any chances. But you can see it here throughout the running session, and if you look at the extending running session, you'll see it performed extremely well. The only issue I had, and this is the only one because it performed immaculately, and it's an extremely good slow runner. This is a fantastic crawler, this locomotive. But it was the top speed. The prototypical speed for the Class 92 is 87 miles per hour. And this was maxing out at around 80, 81 miles per hour, and that's with the CV5 set to 255. Whether I use sound or no sound, it's just fundamentally was maxing out. And I do like models to be able to achieve their prototypical maximum scale speed, so something I do look for in a model. So that was the one thing. Again, which is a pity, because otherwise this is a fabulous runner. It's a fantastic performer. Slow crawl here at the end. I slow crawled this thing around 3 circuits of the track at like the equivalent of 2 to 3 miles an hour on my settings, and it just faithfully did it. It took about half an hour to get around, and even without the DCC sound, a very silent motor as well. So really good running session. Very pleased with this model from a running perspective. The maximum scale speed, prototypical speed, that's the only gotcha. Okay, so let's get into the summary. So we're looking at the Accurascale Class 92, which comes in a large range of liveries, and there are also quite a number of special editions from different vendors. So it's as well to look at some of those. You might be interested in some of those. I think Carno have a very nice special livery, for example. It comes in two forms, 21-pin DCC ready, or the sound fitted variants. That version I've been testing here was obviously a sound fitted version. It comes with a 5-pole motor with 2 flywheels, all-wheel pickup and all-wheel drive, and also stay-alive capacitors. So it comes with the kind of performance you'd expect from an Accurascale model like this, and the newer models from Bachmann, etc. Runs on radius 2 curves, which I tested it on, and there is provision on this for regauging to P4 and EM scales, and I really do think that's a fantastic idea, and I do take my hat off to Accurascale for this. I wish all of the vendors, particularly for locomotives, would do this, because I think there does need to be a migration to a proper scale for OO gauge locomotives in the future, and I think this is a way of creating a path to that for modelers. In terms of extra features, this comes very heavily loaded. The lighting pack is really, really good. It includes independently controllable directional headlights, cab lights, and also the panel display lights that come on. So it really is a very comprehensive set of lighting features on this particular model. It does have metal sprung buffers, which I always do like to see, and it's got the dual motorized pantographs, and they do work well. I do like the action of those pantographs. Cosmetic issues aside from an appearance perspective, so that's a separate point, but the implementation of the motorized pantographs and the fact that they're selectable, I think is very good. It comes with a relatively modest detailing kit, so there is a lot of pre-fitted detail on the buffer beams of this, so that's not surprising. It has twin speakers on all models. Now, the top scale speed that I measured was 81 miles per hour, and it was probably in that kind of 79 miles per hour to 81 miles per hour range. I don't have a figure for the actual current draw. By the time I was measuring this, the locomotive had started to display problems for me, so get into those in a few minutes, but I could not get a definitive measurement, and that's something I'm going to need to test on another model. So we'll talk more about that in a minute. The unbox weight is quite a heavy 685 grams. In the hand, it doesn't actually feel as heavy as that, but it is a heavy locomotive. It is substantial. And I didn't really test it much in the running session, but I think this thing should be able to handle pretty large rakes for sure. The selling prices are more or less the same everywhere. $189.99 for the DCC Ready and $279.99 for the Sound Fitted versions, and some of those you may see at $289.99. I think the Kernow one in the Stobart livery is at that slightly higher price. That's all as of December 2022. So let's get into the scoring. The scoring is going to be incomplete, is the first thing. I'm going to score everything I can score, and then there's going to be one score and the totals that are going to carry over to part 2 of this review. On running performance, I'm giving it a 9.5 out of 10, and the 0.5 is the failure to achieve the prototypical maximum scale speed. But apart from that, this is a superb runner, easily one of the best running locomotives I've seen this year. I really loved the recent Bachmann Class 47, for example, which is an ultra smooth, beautiful running locomotive, and this is in the same category as that, and in the same category, I guess, as the Class 55 Deltic from earlier in the year, but it's a really superb model. Just a pity it could not achieve that speed, and again, that's something I will retest on a second unit, and there is an outside chance that may have been specific to the unit I had. And if that's the case then, and if I do achieve that scale speed on my second model, then it will adjust the scoring, and I'll reflect that in the part 2 of this review. Appearance and detail, I do have to knock it a 1. I debated whether it's 0.5 or a 1, but I really do think it is a 1, when particularly the pantograph. When you compare the prototype to the model, really the profile of the pantographs in the lowered position, it just doesn't look good, and it does stand out. Now, I think you could probably mitigate that with a little bit of weathering on the pantograph, which would effectively reflect what they look like in reality, but it still does protrude quite a bit, so it's nothing like what the prototype is. So that combined with the PCB, the visible PCBs, which again, it's not just visible in one place, it's visible in 2 places, or you could even argue 3, but if you count the vents twice or the doors twice, I just think it is a 1 off for that overall, which is a huge shame because there's so many other positives around this model. I do love the illuminated panels, for example. I'll just call that out. The detail in the cab is fantastic. The rest of the detail on the roof is extremely good. And as I said, the underbody bogie detail is also extremely good. So it is a pity that those items didn't get picked up sooner. And I'm conscious that the position of PCBs is going to be a challenging one. That you have to go right back to probably the early stages of the design to pick that one up and do something about it. The Pantograph one, again, maybe there's issues there in terms of the available space, that there wasn't enough space provisioned to allow them to lower sufficiently, etc. So they are what they are. The only real issue I had with the sound was the distortion due to overdrive on one or both of those speakers, and that is very noticeable on the default settings out of the box. Now, as I said, I changed the global setting, CV63. Now, it's a pity that CV63 isn't actually referenced on the DCC reference card. It references all the individual volume settings for individual sounds. Now, you could probably go trying to tweak some of those to achieve the same effect, but that'd be a lot more tedious, and there's certainly no way I was going to get into that. And I relied on just using the global sound setting on CV63. And as I said, the value of 120 pretty well works for me. I'm happy with that. I'm happy with the volume level with that. And that was the only real thing there on the sound. Otherwise, I think the overall sound package is excellent, and particularly the deceleration sound. I really like that on this model. I just haven't heard that as good on any other model. Most other models, they just throttle down to a lower level, but this actually gives you a real deceleration sound where you've got the engine braking effectively taking effect, that kind of thing on an electric motor. And I really did like that sound effect on this particular model. It is really, really good, and overall the sounds are good. But as I say, you just don't want to be overdriving the speakers, or you will get that distortion. The extras and variants, the overall package here is fantastic. There's as I say, a massive number of variants of the model in fantastic liveries, a comprehensive set of features on the model. And I guess my only gripe, and people will know this if you've been on the channel before, is the missing driver. Though they are producing drivers for this, that there'll be three printed and painted drivers. It's just a pity they couldn't have been in the model from day one. I guess people don't agree with me on that point, as I said already. That's just the reason this isn't a 10. If there was a driver in this model, I'd be giving it a 10 for this score. Build quality and packaging is a TBD. Now, the packaging is not a TBD. It's excellent. It's the same as the Class 55 Deltic. It's the same as a lot of the DAPL models. So that's a 5 out of 5 for that. It's the build quality question, which I want to talk about in a few minutes, and that's really all about a problem I had with this model at the back end of the testing. So we'll get to that just after this. Price value, I'm splitting the difference here. I think the price value for the sound fitted models is a 9. I think for the non-sound fitted models it's an 8. So I'm splitting the difference on this one. It's not a cheap model, but this is a premium feature set, and this is a premium model, so that's what I'm measuring it against. So I don't have overall scores. We will come back to that afterwards. In the process of my final performance testing, the model, which up to that point had behaved impeccably, started to behave erratically. This was visible on the track, and even more so when you looked at the levels of current consumption, which were now peaking out at over 700 milliamps. These are unheard of figures for a double gauge model. At this point, I was clearly not dealing with a properly working model anymore, and any further measurements would be meaningless. My second Class 92 isn't arriving for another week, so I didn't have another model to compare against. My current unit is going back to Accurascale for repair or replacement. Now, early life failures do happen, and I don't factor them in my scoring unless there's been a track record of them that you wouldn't expect. Earlier this year, I received an out-of-box failure in the form of a Class 43 HST from Hornby. That was returned and required a PCB to be replaced. The repaired model was absolutely fine, and that is what I reviewed in the end. At this point, I want to test my second Class 92, which is arriving next week. I should be able to get a stable peak current measurement for that, and I'll also be looking to see if that model can achieve the prototypical maximum speed. If it can, then that would be an indicator that the failure to achieve this on the first model was in fact a warning sign of a potential problem. Clearly, if I start to see the performance of the second model deteriorate as I did for the first, I will have to interpret that we do indeed have a problem here. If not, and all is good, then the missing results will be based on the second model, and that's what will form my final scoring and recommendation. And finally, here's where you come in. If you have a Class 92, how have you found it performance-wise? Have you seen any potentially erratic performance? If you have a DCC Concepts alpha meter, what sort of current measurements are you seeing for your Class 92 under different speeds and different loads? Accurascale's Class 92 has already enjoyed a coronation from most other reviewers, and I would gladly follow suit if the follow-up testing and feedback warrant that. For now, my jury is out, and I'll rely on my testing of the second unit and the feedback from your good selves and from Accurascale to determine my final scoring and recommendation. As soon as I have that, I will post the part 2 of this review, which will capture the updated scoring and my final recommendation. The issues I've highlighted in terms of the sound distortion and the visual PCB and pantograph items still hold, of course, and if you have other experiences with the model you'd like to share, please do so in the comments. I'm delaying my favourite and most disappointing models of 2022 video, pending the outcome here, as the Class 92 is clearly a contender to fall into either category depending on how things pan out. It's not ideal, but the only other option would be to exclude it altogether, and I don't believe that is appropriate. So thanks for watching today. Part 2 will be a lot shorter and to the point one way or another, so please join me for that in about a week's time. In the meantime, I want to wish you a happy, healthy and peaceful new year wherever you live. Take care and happy modelling.